My name is Lujain Fattal, and I'm the Empowered Aid Research Manager with CARE International in Lebanon. I have been involved in the project since the beginning with the design and planning phase, then throughout the implementation phase, which included data collection, data analysis, reflection activities, and the write ups of the findings, up until the last and third phase of the project, which is the research uptake and dissemination element.
Through Empowered Aid, we gave the women and girls a voice for them to echo what they've been wanting to say, and for other aid agencies, other aid actors to listen to them and to get to know what their struggles are and what their proposed solutions are.
And so seeing that disregard again and again for how distributions of aid can put women and girls at risk of sexual exploitation and abuse, or SEA, is what led to the desire to do work to support preventing it. The other piece of this is, of course, that when we think about SEA and other forms of gender-based violence, or GBV, we know that the underlying power dynamics, gendered power dynamics, that are very unequal in these settings are a root cause. When we think about research, which is a big part of prevention, how do we know, why violence is happening and what we can do to stop it? Research often also has these unequal power dynamics. So Empowered Aid is using participatory action research to work with those most affected, in this case refugee women and girls, and really support them to be in roles that determine what questions are asked about their lives and how we answer those questions.
تجربتي كانت كتير منيحة وقوية، يعني خلتنا نقدر نحكي، خلتنا نقدر نعبر عن رأينا، نحكي اللي بدنا إياه، بس كان بدنا مين يعني يقلنا إنه نحكي يعني شو بدي أقولك، نعبر اللي بقلبنا. يعني تجربة كتير كانت منيحة وكتير قوية وخلتنا نقوي شخصيتنا كتير بشكل قوي.
I think the recommendations are very clear. Again, we are mentioning that GBV is not only, we're mentioning that SEA is not only a GBV focal point responsibility, it's everyone's responsibility. And the recommendations are very much divided by sector. So it's very clear, it's to the point, and it highly encourages and mobilizes other actors to be involved in SEA as well.
We initially began with a participatory action research workshop with the participant, of course, in an age appropriate format. So we had separate workshops for women and adolescent girls. And the main objective of the workshop was to introduce the project, to ensure that there's transparency, to ensure that there's easy access to information, and there's opportunity for all kinds of feedback. So we covered the project's purpose, the participant roles in the project, ethical and safety considerations, and the reminder and the voluntary nature of women and girls' participation.
من خلال المناقشة اللي كنا فيها اخترنا بس 4 مساعدات، واللي هن المالية والمأوى والصرف الصحي والأكل.
احنا كنا هيك هي اكثر وحده كنا تعرضنا لها نحن بالتوزيع، اكثر شيء انه تعرضنا قوه السيطره. مثلا بدنا نروح نستلم اول شيء مثلا شوفير تاكسي قلنا، فيني احكي توسع؟ ايه مثلا شوفير تاكسي قلنا مثلا اطلعي انه بوصلك وباخذ منك مبلغ نص القيمه وهيك.
بتذكر رسمنا خريطة المجتمع وشو بيصير على الطريق وكيف تكون أماكن التوزيع وشو المخاطر اللي بيصير معنا بالطريق وكيف إنه وين التوزيع حيكون وكيف.
لا تجربتي معكم كانت أكيد حلوة كتير، وحسينا كثير براحة لما نحن شاركنا هول المواضيع معكم، ولما نحن وصلنا صوت، لما نحن قدرنا إنه نحن نوصل صوت الناس اللي ما قدروا إنه يوصلوا صوتهم، ولما نحن قدرنا إنه نحكي قصص الناس اللي ما كانوا قادرين إنه يحكوا قصصهم. فهذا الشيء كان طابع منيح لنا وكان عم يعطينا خبرة لقدام بحياتنا.
I think what is really important is that we take time and effort to provide feedback to communities and to what were the outcomes of the study, and how do we want to engage them in the response as well. Because remember, we spoke about the whole engagement circle. And I believe it's very important to continue engaging also persons of concern or whoever was consulted. So that is one important element.
So my name is Amelia Reese Masterson, and I've been a research consultant with Empowered Aid for the past 2 years. So that means I've been involved both supporting the CARE International team in Lebanon, as well as working with the team at George Washington University at the Global Women's Institute. I've been supporting with capacity building, with training around participatory methods, particularly in Lebanon, and also supporting data collection and participatory analysis of that data collection, and then writing up the results of the study.
I've been a part of the project since we began the field work in phase 1. I would go to Lebanon and Uganda very frequently to help the country teams in planning and executing the participatory action research in phase 1, and then help plan the pilots in phase 2.
عملت 4 مقابلات، مقابلة الصرف الصحي، ومقابلة الأكل والشرب، ومقابلة المال، ومقابلة المأوى والمسكن.
يوم رسمنا خريطة التوزيع وحطينا نقط مشان التوزيع وشو المخاطر اللي بتصير عندهم.
لا بالعكس كانوا كتير مناح مثلا، ونحن حاولنا نستفيد ونفيد غيرنا كمان بالمجتمع، ونحاولنا مثلا انه نقدم شيء او صوتنا مثلا يطلع لكل المناطق وكل المنظمات وكل يعني مكان التوزيع.
طبعا الرسومات كتير كانت رائعة وانبسطنا فيها، ولقينا انه كتير فيها اشياء كتير انه نحن نكون نتفهم، وكيف نروح مثلا على الطريق، مثلا التوزيع، مثلا كيف صار رسمنا التوزيع كيف اي مطرح. كتير كان حلو، الرسومات كتير كانت حلوة، بتعبر عنا وعن اللي بيوزع بالمحلات أو غير محلات وعن الشارع.
أنا الاقتراح اللي أنا حبيته إنه هو مثلا فصل الرجال عن النساء، وهو ينعكس هذا الشيء بالنتائج، فأنا كتير حبيته. The purpose of Phase 2 of Empowered Aid was to test out the recommendations that were given by women and girls during Phase 1. We wanted to measure if the adapted distributions increased perceptions of safety using post-distribution monitoring tools.
So this is Dima Ghazal. I was part from the distribution pilot with our partnership with CARE. I work at URDA. So I was part for several steps in this pilot, from data collection to distribution points to M&E monitoring tools. So the tools that we adapted were the observational tool in addition to the household survey. The adaptation was made on a pre-existing tool. So actually adapting an existing tool is much more easier than inventing another tool or a new tool. Okay, so one of the things that we have done is to include questions regarding the risks and the safety of the women and girl through different points of the distribution. So for example, we asked how did you travel from the distribution point back to your home or back to your house? Did you see any interaction between a taxi driver and any other beneficiary or receiving the aid?
Of course, I think it's quite interesting to see how the tools that can be shared with WASH, with shelter, with cash, make other, think that good program is not about, quality WASH facility or I don't know, cash assistant that is quite, aligned with the standard, but also quality programming entails or must have a very robust, strong component related to the safety and the dignity of women and girls. Otherwise, the program, no matter how well designed and will never be a quality program if it doesn't have this component related to the safety and dignity of women and girls. And I really like the fact that you have added this component related to the dignity and the equity, because I remember in the beginning we were talking first a lot just about the safety, but with the tools, I think you shed the light on the component related to the dignity, because in majority, we all know that SEA is underreported, but in a lot of instances, we have heard women and girls talking about, I don't know, misbehavior of some staff, disrespectful attitude. So the tools are really talking, very clearly about this and shedding the light on this. I think this is perfect.
The tools do not only help women and girls and protect them from SEA. The tools also help researchers, the field members, the actors involved in giving the aid, distributing the aid, the officers, the managers, in making sure that SEA is clearly prevented. Violence against women in all means is truly prevented. So how the tools can be used? The tools are a part of a full package, as a whole, full holistic package. So it's a full cycle, from registration for beneficiaries and the programmatic actors, as well as during distribution and post-distribution.
So first we held trainings with a different staff member on gender and its core aspects so that they understood what SEA meant and how it's applicated on the field. And then later on we took them, we trained them on the different tools that we were using to monitor the perception of SEA. So that's the PODQ and the safety audit. And these tools had two components to them, the theoretical component and the practical component.
Okay, so as for me, as I said before, taking and training theoretically and practically is very important. So you know what you're talking about and then you practice it. And then the more that you practice, the more that you can engage the beneficiary in the questionnaire, and the more and you get adapted to ask about sensitive topics, if you want to say. In addition to that, I would add also that a presence of a translator or a facilitator in the designing of the tool, as well as the training, is very important. So we can use يا اما a universal language that everyone would understand, يا اما to translate it that also everyone will understand what we are saying or talking about.
It was quite interesting to see that the Empowered Aid action research shed the light on the importance of information sharing with women and girls themselves, because eventually we all know that information is power, and we really, with whatever we do, we want to give back the power again to women and girls. So that's why we made sure when presenting the cash program that we reached out to the women-led organization and let them really, and to, for example, women-led organization, domestic workers organization, organization for person with disability, all these marginalized, overlooked group were part of this information sharing about the cash assistance program.
I think the tools have a great added value for those who don't have tools at all, but also for those who have the tools, because this is a tool that is updated. It's based on communities' views. It's tested, and it's enriched with feedback from different partners or experts who work already in the field. Of course, I would encourage this tool to be used by others.
And for the program implemented specifically by UNICEF, of course, you all know that after the Beirut blast, UNICEF was pushed to do a large-scale cash assistance program for families affected by the blast. And again, here we have used a lot the Empowered Aid findings and tools to really make this program much more safer. So at the beginning of the planning for this program or for this cash program, I shared the findings of the Empowered Aid research action plan with senior colleagues working on the cash program, letting them see what the risk and acknowledging that cash is a program where there are a lot of risks and we have to really proactively work on mitigating risk and not really wait for SEA incident to happen.
The findings are cross-sectoral. They're not just restricted to the GBV and the SEA sectors or any other sector related to women empowerment. So whether it's a medical sector, relief, or shelter sector, these findings, they should be disseminated to everyone in order to give them the guiding principles on how to act in terms of confronting, facing, stopping, and minimizing SEA